Welcome back. Today, I am joined by Dr. Samina Ahmed, who is here on behalf of Kaiser Permanente. Now, she is the Chief of Hematology Oncology at Kaiser Permanente, Orange County, and she covers the Anaheim and Irvine hospitals. Well, Dr. Ahmed, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Now, as I talked off camera, we talk a lot about different types of cancers and, some of the things that are associated with cancer, like what it is and what happens to you when you have it. But even though we will talk a little bit about cancer, we're also going to talk about some lifestyle factors and overall health associated with our body when we are diagnosed with cancer, correct?
Correct.
Perfect. Before we get started, though, let me have you go ahead and tell me a little bit about yourself, please.
Oh, sure. So my name is Dr. Samina Ahmed, and I'm the Chief of Hematology Oncology at Kaiser Permanente, Orange County, which covers both the Anaheim and Irvine hospital campuses. I treat solid tumors, so that's the medical oncology part, as what is also considered blood cancers, such as leukemias and lymphomas. And we also do benign hematology, so blood conditions.
Okay, good. Describe to me blood conditions.
Sure. So sometimes we'll have patients come in with certain forms of anemia, like thalassemias. And so we monitor their blood counts and give them advice and counseling on treatments so that they can live as normal a life as possible. Other blood conditions besides anemia, we do have patients, for example, with sickle cell disease that we also help treat and monitor, patients with hemophilia that have a deficiency in clotting factors, which leads to excessive bleeding. So we help with management. Those are a few examples.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Now, when we talk about cancers, there are a variety of cancer risks. And of course, some of it is hereditary, other is not. Can you give me a brief overview of what some of the cancer risks are?
As you mentioned, there are the hereditary risk factors and the spontaneous risk factors. Even at this point in time, there's only a small percentage of cancers that are related to a hereditary or genetic condition. Most of the cancers are spontaneous mutations. So when I talk to patients, I talk to them about things that are in our control and not in our control. And that's really where I think the factors that we can control really comes in. And what I mean by that are factors such as eating a healthy diet and physical exercise. In the past, we knew that things like smoking and alcohol were risk factors for multiple types of cancers. And while they still holds true, we are now realizing that obesity is a risk factor for many cancers. So I do think there is some things that we can do to help reduce the risk for those things that we can control.
Now, obesity actually seems to be associated with so many different things. I mean, even with COVID-19, we were seeing that that was one of the most popular things amongst those who were getting COVID-19 was obesity. Why is it that our body, when it is obese, is it breaking down, or what is it actually doing to our body that allows for these kinds of things to happen?
I don't think that we understand completely, but the example that I can use for such as breast cancer risk is that we know that obesity or the fat tissues store extra estrogen. So there can be an overproduction of estrogen in obesity, and that's why postmenopausal women are at risk for breast cancer when they're obese. But that risk also extends even after their treatment. Obesity can increase their risk of recurrence. I think more generally speaking, though, with obesity, just as you mentioned, that in general, for example, when you have obesity, it forces like the pancreas to work overtime. And so the insulin pathways get disrupted. And that's why, you have conditions like diabetes and such.
Okay. Thank you. And then, many times we are asked, mostly when in my position of interviewing lots of different doctors and hospitals, is that they really want cancer screenings. However, that isn't always happening at the primary care level. So what should a patient ask for or look for in order to get a cancer screening?
I think that's a great question. And I think I would emphasize that by saying that patients, each of us have to be our own advocates.
Mhm.
And there are certain screenings that are recommended by the United States Preventative Task Force that I would say that most physicians are aware of and that they understand. So I think it is being your own advocate. I will say that obviously the way COVID disrupted so many things and so many people's lives, it also disrupted the screening. People didn't want to go see their doctors, understandably, because they were afraid of their risk of getting sick. But now, as you know, especially in California, our vaccination rates have increased. It's downtrending, at least the latest numbers that I was aware of. I think it's really important to connect back. And those things that were put off, like your visit with your primary care physician, let's make that a priority and our health a priority. So then we can have that discussion that, okay, what am I due for? What do I need to do? And I think that also goes back to my factors for what you're in control of. You can be your own advocate to make sure that for your own personal health, like you have a checklist of all your other to-do items, that your health is the most important thing that needs to be checked out, making sure that you're taking care of everything that is needed to be done.
Well, and you mentioned that, healthy lifestyles, healthy eating is very important. Of course, exercise without question. When it comes to healthy eating, I wondered if many people being at home for the last couple of years, either help them to eat better or worse. I wonder because, we could buy stuff at the store and just stay home. But I know for myself that I ended up cooking more. So did you find that with some of your patients?
Yeah, I think that was also very interesting that it was the variety of patients. So I did unfortunately have some patients, who had the COVID weight and kind of just shut in and nothing to do but eating. But those others, and quite a few who actually were like, well, this is some time I have finally to actually do things that I had never wanted to do. And just like we've heard across the country with, making their own bread and navigating or saying like, look, now I have this extra time to spend on myself to make those changes. And it starts off with that one change. And what I tell patients too is like the simple, easy things to do. That's what you want to start out with, because that's what you can build on. And the other things, will come into play. But you want to start simply, because sometimes giving yourself too much to do then can be disheartening when you can't get to everything. So it was a pleasure to see a lot of my patients had actually lost weight, not only because they were doing their own cooking and trying out different things, but actually were giving time and being dedicated to their exercise programs.
Yeah, well, that's good. It kind of forced us to reevaluate a lot of things in our lives. So good to know. All right. Well, excellent information. Thank you so much, Dr. Ahmed. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. And we'll be right back after this.